Hi there and welcome back to Station Road. My name is Julian. Now today is part 2 of the refurbishment reconstruction component of my layout, which is more or less the station and pub area, which you can just sort of see behind me through there. Now I have done a blend of video and still photography over the last week and a bit, and some would have seen on my Facebook page and possibly in other model railway groups as well, some still photography of where it's going and how far it's come along. As I've previously mentioned, I like to build up my layout by way of a series of dioramas which can be easily managed and modelled independently and then placed in situ when the time comes. And of course also it makes it easier to move the layout if it had to be ever moved, that these weird dioramas can simply be taken off and packaged up. Now we started with this particular scene that I have in front of me, which was the Metcalfe pub and the idea next door of the construction demolition site, and it is now at a complete phase or complete stage more or less, and so in some respects I probably skipped a few steps in terms of documenting the progress with photography or video. So we're just going to go through a closer look of this in terms of, you know, what I used, how I achieved some certain results, and then we'll place it on the layout in the position, and we'll continue on with the other areas of this rebuild slash construction. So as I just mentioned, these are small separate dioramas, and just simply mounted on quite thin MDF, which seems to work okay. There's not too much warping, and the idea is that there will be a discreetly hidden, like tiny little wee screws or something like that that will actually lock these into position, but also be accessible so that it can be lifted off the layout if need be. So we'll now just take a closer look at this, and I'll switch the camera around and explain some of the things going on in this wee diorama. So here's the Metcalfe pub, which is now in position, and we've also actually got some Metcalfe outdoor furniture as well, which I'd previously built up. Let me just get my pointer, which is an old radio aerial. We have down here, this is I think that's a Pico or ratio mailbox in there. We've got some telegraph poles here. These wee planter boxes I simply made up of offcuts of Metcalfe brickwork and wall edging and so forth, with some sort of kind of like pre-made foliage that comes on a sheet and you just simply cut it out. What else have we got around here? We've got a sort of kind of a more Metcalfe customed wall, brick wall, the same for here as well, that sort of runs down sort of more like a kind of commercial driveway. We've got of course some wooden barrels, and we have a young chap, or maybe we should say an older chap possibly, with his sack barrow carrying some goods in behind. So that's pretty much that area. I've done a little bit of weathering around this sort of area here and on the pavements, and generally what I actually use for the weathering is chalk pastels, which I then actually throw into an electric coffee grinder and blend it up into a super fine powder, and it actually works really well as weathering powders. Also added into some of this weathering here is another method I use is watercolor pencils, and they are actually quite good for getting into some more sort of finer areas. So simply you would just I'd just scribble some watercolor pencil around certain areas and then go around with a wet paintbrush and essentially blend the tones in, and that works quite well as well for weathering. Here we have our wooden fence. Now these are all individual wooden palings made from very thin balsa wood, so I think it's 0.6mm balsa, so they're all individually cut out. I have got a few palings missing. There's a crooked ones in there. There's a little bit of loose fence in there. Now my layout is set in the sort of in the 50s and 60s, maybe going from late 50 to late 60s. So hence I couldn't resist but have a cigarette advertisement on one of the billboards, which is Paul Ball's natural mildness is so good to your taste. And of course we have a young attractive woman lying in the grass having a cigarette. Now I did used to smoke this brand of cigarettes. I don't smoke any longer, but that is the reason behind that. And then we have a Coca-Cola billboard as well. Now I don't think either one of these were never actually billboards. I just simply found print adverts from the 60s and kind of converted them and pushed them around a bit to fit into a billboard shape. So this one here is a young lad taking home his 6-pack of Coca-Cola bottles. We have a granddaughter and grandmother down here, and the granddaughter is sick of walking and is really tired now, and the grandmother has turned back to look at her and say, come along, we have got to get home. But the granddaughter is not cooperating. These wee gates here, what I've actually done is the mesh is actually from an old radio grill. I can't remember where, I think it was a radio grill actually. It was an oval shaped radio grill, and I just simply, and this was from years ago, and I thought, oh, I was throwing stuff out and I thought, no, I'm actually going to take that out because I'm sure it'll come in handy one day, because it kind of looked a little bit like mesh fencing. So that's where that comes from. Now the actual framework in here is actually from an old level crossing gates turned sideways and trimmed down. So that was my solution to that situation. We have a Scaledale, I think that's a, we'll get into frame. We have a Scaledale telephone box there. And of course all of this is Metcalfe paving, and of course once again we have our weathering and so forth. So the fence is all sort of weathered up. There's a little bit of washes in there. There's a bit of chalk pastel powder again is used in there as well. Yeah, so you know, it's just sort of worked up in some layers in order to sort of get that really sort of weathered, run down look about it. So, and this is the construction area. This hasn't really changed a great deal from the still photographies that I'd actually put up on Facebook the other day. But the main areas that of course have been updated is we've now got this sort of kind of discarded, unkept section that would, if you could imagine it, would carry on, which is adjacent to the pit. More sort of overgrownness along that edge of the pub. We have got the streaky weathering on the brick walls of the pub. Now that's created from watercolor pencil, so it's just simply drawn on the lines and then going over with a damp brush to sort of blend it in. Yeah, we've got this sort of grass material here. This is actually not static grass. This is actually a it's hikey or whatever it's called. It's this stuff here, if you can see that. That's all sort of kind of chopped up bits, but it does sort of come in a kind of a rolled up sheet. I actually found this stuff really tricky to try and actually use and apply, because it's actually really quite wiry and bushy. I actually found the easiest way for me to secure this down was actually to use hot glue. We've got some sort of mounds of dirt along here, which is basically it's that milli putty shaped into earth piles and then garden dirt. actually glued on top of that. So so we've got some real materials in here in terms of the soil and so forth. We've got a wee stack of timber down there, and we've got this sort of remnants of an old basement or a well, building foundations that have not been completely removed. And the story goes is these chaps are down there actually just pillaging some bricks for their own personal use. This is a site that was maybe that I'm picturing was, you know, a building was demolished several years earlier, and then the company that was doing it went bust, and the site has just sat empty ever since, and nothing's happened to it. And these guys are down there thinking, well, I'm just going to score myself some bricks. So yeah, that's the story behind this scene. So we zoom in there, you can see the young fellas down there hacking away, helping themselves to some bricks. So yeah, that's pretty much the scene close up. So we'll now actually just switch over and we'll put this in position and see how it looks, and then we can carry on with some other parts of the renovation series. Right, so this is the area which of course got the rejuvenation or renovation process applied to it, and this is the area which is going to accommodate the pub and the construction site. Now, as you can see, and this was on the previous video, that I've cut out the wee shape or recess so that the construction site actually sits below the baseboard level. So we'll just pop this into position. One other thing that I do need to do, which I haven't done yet, of course, is we have some wiring for lights underneath. Now I've got to tidy that all up. I'm going to put a circuit board that these are all going to be soldered to, and then go down through one set of wires. And of course I've got to cut out a section in here where these wires are actually going to go through. But in the meantime, we'll just pop this on, and it just simply slots into that hole, and I'll just shift that wire out of the way. And that's it, sitting in position. Now you can see there, you know, that is going to need anchoring down, but what I'm thinking of doing is just simply discreetly adding a screw. There is the other thought of magnetizing this, but it's right on the edge here, and the same also for that corner. So essentially it's going to be fixed there and there, but with a system that I can actually detach it from the baseboard if need be. There we have it in position. So it's certainly an improvement from what was previously there, which was there was a little bit of a culvert and a grassy area, and of course the old pub as well, but definitely got more interest to it. I've also added in a barrel and some or crate in there. There's some other barrels over there as well. I've got to do a bit of weathering in there still inside that pub area. It's looking a little bit too pristine and clean. And then if we look down here at Street View, so yeah, the idea is that people coming straight out of the station, they are greeted with these lovely billboards on the opposite side of the street. And if we just sort of move around, so looking at it from the other side, so this is sort of a we'll try and do a panning street view, so you can see how it's sort of going to look. And there we have it. So the next step really now that I've developed this particular area here is now to actually look at the other side of the street and the station area. Now what I've done is this is permanently fixed onto here, which is another thin bit of MDF, and it's basically cut to shape of the pavement, and the idea is that the platform, or the station and platform which is here, is the removable piece, so it can be lifted on and off if need be. So it is cut to the shape of the base of the station and simply slots in to fit that space. Once again, I'm going to have to put in some discrete anchors for this station as well, because there's a little bit of movement there which needs to be adjusted as well. But essentially we're going to do the same paving stones and curbing and so forth, and I think we can also actually get on and do the street tarmac as well. So this area here, I've changed this a little bit, and that is going to be quite a large sort of paved area or stone paving area, but I kind of thought that might be quite a cool area to have like a little farmer's market. So I'm going to have some stalls, and maybe well, I've actually got a I think an ice cream van trailer as well, which we can set up there, you know, just for some more interest, and make it look a little bit more lifelike. So we're just going to finish off this part two just by getting a base color onto this area here, where the replacement baseboards have been installed. And I think when we get into part three, that's when we'll actually really start to develop the station area and also the street scene as well, including the street tarmac or road, and also actually working in these brick arch retaining walls that I had put together in a previous video. So we've now got the base grey down on the baseboard, and even just doing that, we can now really start to see how it's going to look when it's all finished. So there's our street scene, and with our billboards and dilapidated old wooden paling fence, pub down further down the road on the corner, and the station, of course, on the other side, which will have steps, which much like the previous rendition of steps were, but I'm probably going to, rather than recycle them, I think I might just build them again. So there we have it. We'll just take in some aerial views. And I've just reconnected up the track. I haven't pinned that back down just yet. Put the station platforms back down. All pretty much sort of generally placed at the moment, but yeah, it's coming together. It's probably taking a bit longer than I thought it would actually, but that's the joys of model railroading. And the next step, part 3, of course, as I mentioned, we will start to build up the other side of the street with the paving and farmers market, although I might not be able to get the stalls because being in lockdown it's very difficult to try and get hold of things. And also be looking at how best to anchor these down and discreetly, but sure I'll find a solution. If there's anyone out there who has other ways of anchoring down sort of like separate dioramas, that would be greatly appreciated. I did come across a local chap here in Christchurch who he used magnets to secure the separate sort of dioramas on his layout, but of course in this situation here it's not probably really possible because it's right actually on the edge of the layout. There's a big beam underneath there, but I did actually think the idea of magnets was actually a very clever idea. So we'll leave it at that, and hopefully next weekend we'll have part 3 up. So stay safe everyone, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Cheers. Bye for now.